What's happening, everybody? Boy Big Brando, and today let's talk about embroidery. Now, this is a common question I get all the time. I got a few videos talking about embroidery. I always get people in my comments, in my emails, in my DMs asking about embroidery. They always want to know, what shop do I use? They always want to know, where should I go? They always want to know what the minimum is. They always want to know, what do I pay for embroidery? So the best way I could explain this is by letting you guys know a bunch of my mistakes that I made, so hopefully you guys don't make these same mistakes when you guys are getting some stuff embroidered. Now, as most of you guys know, I mainly get hats embroidered. I rarely do any shirts and polos and hoodies and crew necks. I know it's popular right now. I know there's a lot of people doing embroidery on hoodies and crew necks and stuff and joggers, and that's cool. But for myself, I personally don't do that. I usually just get my hats embroidered. Now, there's gonna be people that are gonna be asking, hey man, where do you get your stuff embroidered at? I wanna go exactly where you go to. And that's cool. But I always suggest to go to a local shop, somewhere around you. I never suggest ordering anything online when it comes to embroidery, and I never suggest going with a shop that's states away or far away from you. The reason being, you want to be able to check a proof sample before they run your stuff. Now you're asking yourself, what's a proof sample? A proof sample is going to be one hat that they stitch up and show you. So as a small clarification on the embroidery process, I personally don't do embroidery. I always outsource it out. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna send the embroidery shop your file. Your vector file is gonna be then digitized. That's gonna tell the embroidery machine and the person running the machine how many stitches it's gonna take to cover up your whole design on that hat. Whether you're doing a flat embroidery or you're doing like a 3D puff embroidery, like the new era hats and stuff like that, that's gonna tell the machine how many stitches it takes to go across there to cover it all up with thread. So your vector file that you send to the embroidery shop is gonna have to get digitized. That embroidery shop is gonna charge you a digitizing fee. It could be anywhere from 20 bucks to like 120 bucks, depending on detail in the design, how many times it has to switch colors, all of that stuff. So there is that one-time fee of getting something digitized. There's no way around it. That's just what it is. And that digitizing software, pretty expensive. So after they digitize it, they're gonna put the file into the machine, they're gonna load up your hat, and then it's gonna start stitching away. Now, if it's a flat embroidery, all it's gonna do is just stitch directly onto the hat. If it's a 3D puff embroidery, they're gonna lay a piece of foam down, stitch on top of the foam, and then it's gonna give you that little 3D puff effect on your hat. So now that you know how embroidery works, let's go back and talk about these proof samples. So chances are, if you're going through an embroidery shop, they got a big 6, 8, 12 head machine, and they're gonna be stitching all your hats at the same exact time. Boom, 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 boom. So what they do is they run a proof sample first. A lot of print shops do this, embroidery shops do it also. So what they're gonna do is put one hat down, stitch it up, bang, 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 bang. As it comes off, you then can check that proof sample to make sure everything looks good. Now here's some of the mistakes that I made when I first started getting stuff embroidered. I had no idea about this proof sample process. I had no idea how important it was to the embroidery process. So what you have to remember is this one proof sample is gonna tell you what all your other hats are gonna look like. This one hat is gonna say, all right, you're buying off, you're saying it's okay to print the logo exactly what it looks like on this proof sample. So now when they load the machine up, every machine is gonna have the same stitch count. It's gonna be going through the same motions. That's what every single hat's gonna look like based off of this one proof sample. So my mistake was, I said, hey, just send me a picture, it's all good. So this is all I had told the shop when I got some hats done, was I wanted a hat that's like a new era hat. I couldn't get blank new eras, so I had to settle for a different fitted hat. This is back when fitted hats were popular. I know they're coming back to being popular, but snapbacks took over for a while. This is before the snapback boom. This is strictly new era. Fitted hats were it at that time. So I tell the shop, I want a hat that fits like a new era hat. Guy was like, all right, yeah, that's cool, I could do that for you. And then I said, all right, and I want the stitching to be exactly like a new era hat. I didn't know it was called puff or 3D. I didn't have any idea what it was called, but I was doing this to him. I said, yeah, man, I want it to be like, you know, like a new era hat, like this. Whatever that meant. So the guy's like, all right, cool, man. I have your proof done. You buy it off. We'll run all of them. And I think I ordered, I don't know, somewhere around like 120 hats or something like that. We get into it. A week goes by. he emails me. He's like, all right, your proof is done. You want to come by and check it out? I'm like, ah, it's cool, man. Just send me a picture. Let me check it out. And I was just being lazy. The shop wasn't that far from me, but I was just being very lazy. He sends me the picture. Black hat, white stitching. I looked at it. All right, cool. It looks good. It looks like what I want it to look like. My email back to him is, cool, let's run it. Knock it out. A week goes by. All 120 hats are done. I go and pick them up. I'm thanking them this and that. I even shot them a little extra $20 just for helping me out as like a tip or whatever. Take all the hats home. I open them up when I get home and I'm like, what the hell is this? Now, first off, my big issue was the logo was very, very big on the crown. In the picture, I didn't really notice how big it was, but it was way bigger than what I wanted. And I believe my original file to him, I think was like 3.5 inches or something like that, which is a very big design on a hat. When you think about hats, you got to remember the placement, making sure it's balanced, and making sure that it fits the hat correctly. So what I ended up doing was just okaying it, right? So I said, yeah, run it. Didn't realize how big the logo looked in person. So the logo's huge on the hat, for one. For two, there wasn't enough stitches to cover the foam. A lot of the foam in the corners of the design, the foam was like it was popping out. Like you could see the white foam behind the threads. So when I went back and I matched it up with the picture that he sent, it looked exactly the same. But what I didn't know is that on the picture that he sent, the contrast was just bumped up really high. So it was a really dark black hat and then a really, really blown out white stitching. So it looked like everything was covered, but it really wasn't. So now I have 120 hats with huge logos and the foam sticking out, and I'm like, oh man, this sucks. I can't sell them. I wasted all that money and I gave this dude a tip on top of that. So I went back to the guy and I was like, hey, what the fuck, man? Like, all these hats are fucked up. And he said, hey, you bought them off. Like, I told you, check the proof. You bought it off. You said, okay, run it. So I ran it exactly like it. And I'm mad as hell, right? I'm just tripping out where I'm mad. And I'm going back and forth with the dude, and the dude is just like, well, what do you want me to do? Because you're the one that bought this off. This is why you check your proof sample before you run it. And in my head, I'm thinking like, well, you're the shop. Like, wouldn't you know that this is sticking out and this doesn't look right? What the shop is doing is they're trying to minimize the thread count, right? Obviously to save materials on their end. So they're going with the bare minimum thread count to make sure it's covered up. And what I'm wanting is the most threads to cover it up. But since I didn't check that proof sample, that's why shit looked fucked up. So it was a big loss on my part. So now I got 120 hats that I can't sell, can't move. I don't even want to show nobody, and it's just the biggest loss ever. So I'm like, you know what? This guy's a shady dude. You know what I mean? I got all these fitted hats that I can't move. He doesn't want to make this right. Screw this guy. He don't know what he's doing. So I'm thinking, you know, all embroidery shops locally suck because of this one experience. So what I end up doing is hitting up one of my partners who's getting a lot of stuff manufactured overseas, and I'm like, hey, does your people do embroidery? And he's like, yeah, man, they could do embroidery. So I'm like, all right, cool, man, like, let's talk numbers. I want to get some stuff done. And I'm not really asking him to walk me through the process, but I'm just asking him for him to connect the dots for myself so I could get some stuff done. He's like, but you got to know that it's like a 200 piece minimum. And I'm like, hey, I just spent X amount of dollars on 120 hats that I can't even sell, so I got nothing to lose here. 200 is an easy call. So we end up doing the deal, right? So I go through this overseas manufacturer. That overseas manufacturer is basically walking me through the process, but we're going through email with really, really broken English. So I'm trying to explain. I still don't know the names of all this stuff, and I don't know how to explain certain things, and I'm still using the I want something to fit like a new era hat and shit like that. So this manufacturer that I'm going back and forth with obviously is in China. Time difference is way off, so they're sending stuff when it's nighttime over here. I'm reading it when it's daytime here, but it's nighttime over there. So we're like a one-day thing behind. So it's really slowing down the production. And this is just going back and forth of what I'm trying to do versus what they can actually deliver on. So I send them the file, same exact file. This time I sized it down a little bit because I knew it was pretty big. Then I sent it to them, and now I'm thinking I know what's up, so I'm telling them to send me a proof. I want to check it out, this and that. So the first thing they do is they send me a couple pictures, and they did a pretty good job at taking pictures, because what they did was they put a ruler or scale next to it so I could see the sizing of the actual stitching. They did like some like straight on shots, and then they turned it so I could see the puff, and it looked fairly good, right? But I'm like, oh man, I'm not letting these pictures fool me. So I'm like, you know what? Send me the proof sample before you run it. Now this is coming from China, so to get a sample from China to America took a long ass time and was crazy expensive. So they sent the proof sample over. Weeks go by. I'm talking weeks go by till I get it in hand. I look at it. I'm like, all right, cool, man. This thing is cool. I send the person an email back, say, all right, let's run it. Now I'm dealing with somebody totally different. I'm not even dealing with the same person that I was. The new person I'm dealing with is the new production person or whoever it is, and their English is broken again, and it's a whole, the language barrier sucked all over again. You know what I mean? I'm just like, oh shit, man, like this is what I want. This is what we agreed on before. And the person that I'm talking to now has no idea what I'm even talking about because so many weeks have gone by. So I'm like, look, I got this sample, this worked, let's run it, let's go for it. 200 hat takes like 2.5 months for me to get, and I paid a big amount, you know what I mean? So what ends up happening is after I get the hats in, the hats look good, everything, the stitching is perfect, the blanks they used sucked. The sizing was way off. Naturally, I wear 7 5/8 in a fitted hat for myself. New Era hats, that's what I wear. 7 5/8. I know my size. I've been wearing fitteds for a long ass time. I put on a 7 5/8. That shit fit me like one of those Jewish yarmulkes. Like it was like, it didn't even come down to my forehead. It was like a kid size hat that was labeled 7 5/8. And I tried every single 7 5/8 hat on and they were all the same. The blank they used was like some blank that they just made, but they had all the labeling correct. Everything was good. The sizing was jacked up. So now I got 200 hats that are labeled at a certain size that obviously aren't the right size. Another lesson learned: do not go overseas to get that stuff done. I mean, now it's probably different. This is a long time ago, but still, these are mistakes that I made that I just wasted a shitload of time and money on. To save yourself time and money, you have to go to somebody local so you could see the hat in person. If you're not buying your own blank hats and bringing them to the shop and you're just trusting the shop to order blank hats for you, it makes a lot of sense for you to know what that hat feels like, what it fits like, what it looks like on your head. What if you don't like the bill? What if you don't like the crown size? What if you don't like the way that the hat is structured? These are all things that you need to figure out what you want before you get into this shit, because like I said, it could be a very, very expensive lesson learned. And it's like you could avoid all that by just going to somebody local, checking the proof sample, knowing what hat you're actually stitching on, so you know what exactly you're gonna be offering. So a lot of people are like, hey man, well, you talk about those Yupon classic hats, those 6-panel hats, I see a lot of people using them, I'm gonna use them too. And then you find out if you wear a 7 5/8 or bigger, those hats don't even fit you. You're like on the last 2 snaps on the back, and your customers are like, man, these hats suck. The ones with the big heads are like, these hats suck. So whose fault is that, right? You're going off the recommendation on a lot of other people because they use those hats, but you don't know that those hats aren't geared towards guys with the bigger heads, 7 5/8, size 8, you know what I mean? Like those size heads, it's like a totally different when you're wearing those types of hats, because if your head around is big and then the bill's small, it's like landing here, it looks dumb. And then also on the snaps, I don't know if you ever seen somebody wearing a snapback where it's on the last one and then that shit kind of just goes in like that because it's barely hanging on for life. Nah, man. So know exactly what hat you want to offer your customers or what hats you want to use, and then go through a local embroidery shop so you could check these proof samples before they run all your hats and you waste your money and your time. So if you could find a local embroidery shop, all you got to do is jump on Yelp or Google, but I would trust Yelp. Go on Yelp, type in embroidery shop. All these shops come up. All you have to do is hit them up for quotes. You could walk into their shop and talk to them. All of that stuff, these are tools that you could be using to find local shops for yourself. Prices vary. Depends on region, it depends on who's doing it, depends on volume. So prices vary. But what you're paying for is the quality of the work. You're paying for somebody, you're trusting somebody to stitch all these hats and deliver exactly what you want. So I would stay away from going overseas. I would stay away from ordering online, and I would use a local embroidery shop. And you're supporting a small business or a local business in your community. But outside of that, it's best for you to be able to walk in there and check the proof sample. If you're buying your own hats, you could bring your hats to them, drop ship your hats to them, go over there and pick them up so you don't got to pay shipping and freight and all that stuff. It makes sense to go that route also to save on money. So once again, if you're going to embroider anything, shirts, hoodies, crew necks, hats, beanies, whatever you're doing, when it comes to embroidery, go local. Find a local embroidery shop that you could work with. Make sure you check that proof sample. in person before you buy it off and say, hey, you know what, go ahead and run these. If you have any sort of concern when you check that proof sample, that's when you tell the shop owner, hey, you know what, can we do this? Can we fix this? I don't like the way this looks. Can we resize this? Can we add more threads here? I could see the foam poking out. All of that stuff should be said within that proof sample. That way they can run you another sample and you can check that one out. You know what I mean? Until you get it the way you want it to be. And then there's gonna be the people that say, hey, what embroidery machine should I buy? I have no idea. I don't even own an embroidery machine, so I wouldn't even know what to recommend you or what's good, what's not good. There's other people out here that have single head embroidery machines. They're on YouTube. I would talk to them or watch their videos so you could see how those things work and how it's working out for them. But if you're asking me, I have no idea because I don't own an embroidery machine, all right? Hopefully this information helps you guys out. No, this was a very long video, but this is a question that I get all the time, so I wanted to make sure I answered it as thoroughly as possible. That way you guys are informed when you guys are ordering up and doing all this stuff, because the whole goal is to actually save money and not waste money. You know what I mean? If you got any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments. Follow me on Instagram, Big Brando TV. Catch you guys on the next one, man. Yeah.